Welcome to another episode of Africa Event Connect, where we bring you the voices, stories, and insights that shape the business events and tourism landscape across our continent. I'm your host, Projeni Pather, and today we're diving into a conversation that's very close to my heart: women in MICE and tourism, breaking barriers and building legacies. Now, as we celebrate International Women's Day this month, it's a reminder of how far we've come, but also of the work still ahead. Women are the backbone of the tourism and events industry, yet we continue to see them underrepresented in leadership, underpaid for their contributions, and sometimes overlooked for the roles they are more than qualified to take on. Now, I know from personal experience that making your mark in this industry takes more than just talent. It takes resilience, boldness, and a strong network of support. And that's why I'm thrilled to have today's guest on the show, someone who has dedicated her career to empowering women and shaping the future of tourism and events through education, mentorship, and leadership. Joining me today is none other than Professor Nellie Swart, Associate Professor in Tourism at UNISA, a certified meetings professional, a published author, and a powerhouse in the industry. She leads the Women in Tourism Executive Development Program and has been recognized as one of the top 40 women in MICE and top 5 women in leadership in Africa. If there's anyone who knows how to break barriers and build legacies, it's her. In today's episode, we're not just talking about challenges, we're focusing on solutions. So let's dive into it. Nellie, it's an absolute honor to have you here with us today. I am so excited to have this discussion with you, to learn more about you and your background, and to talk about this exceptionally important topic, women's role and impact in MICE and tourism. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Projeni, and I am so honored to be here today, and I hope that the audience will also have a little bit of value out of the discussion we will have today.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I think there's going to be gems, so everybody better listen up closely. So let's look at women's role in shaping tourism and MICE, right? I know you've been in this industry for a long time and you're really, really passionate about it. So I want people to walk away with some personal concepts and examples in terms of how women-led initiatives that have had lasting impact in this industry.
Yeah, you know what, Projeni, we are blessed with so many wonderful examples. But I think if we can take it one step back, it's important to acknowledge that in the world we're celebrating Women's Day this month of March.
Yes.
And the theme for this year is accelerate action. And I think this is also what we as women need to do, is we need to start to accelerating all of our efforts. And we can tap into the wealth of wisdom of a few of the women in our industry. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I will do justice to this conversation if I don't acknowledge the managing director of Exposure Marketing and the founder of Mama Magic Expo, our own Projeni. And I think that you are renowned for the wonderful work that you are doing in this industry. It's also important for us to look at people like Chanel Gore. Some people might not know about her, but she is also senior designer and project manager at Exhibitionist South Africa. Martina Kumani from the business, who's at the Synergy Business Events, and she's also the chairperson of Scan Display BEE Trust. And internationally, people like Nina Pretorius has made a mark because she was the first African ICA president. Many people might not know this, and maybe I give myself away for how long I've been in the industry, but Carol Weaving, she was the founder of Meetings Africa. And today, she's running a very successful World Travel Market Africa.
Absolutely.
Personally, two women that I work very closely with and I have a lot of respect with is Noni Kubeka from Gauteng Tourism Authority. And of course, people like Toby Motlabani, who's the CEO at the CTICC, who also won an award last year at the African Tourism Leadership Forum of being the most impactful women leader on the continent. So I think all of these women give us a wealth of examples to try and live up to. And I think we can all learn from them.
Wow. That's quite a list That is quite a list, and I get goosebumps as you mention each of them. Acknowledging our relationships with them and having watched their journey, they all have been truly remarkable, truly inspiring, and I think, and there's a lot more where that came from, right? We'd be here for a long time, but let's stay close. There's a lot more to reveal. So. In your experience, what are the key leadership strengths that these women bring to these industries, and how can young professionals also develop these skills early in their careers? I mean, some of us didn't have that kind of mentorship or training or guidance, and we just winged it, dug deep, and found the will and found the confidence to find our way. And probably many of these women that you spoke about now didn't have that kind of support.
Yeah, you know what, Projeni, first of all, we mustn't underestimate the value that we have as women. And we sometimes think that we need to have a specific skill, but it is actually within us. And these leadership capabilities is sometimes our intuition. It is the guidance that we have. It is how a situation frames us to take specific leadership roles. We must also remember that as women, we have unique strengths. We are known for our empathy, for our emotional intelligence, for our resilience, for our ability to collaborate. And we are very adaptable.
That's true.
And at the end of the day, we know that in our industry that is driven by innovation, by inclusivity, and by sustainable development, these are all characteristics that we as women bring to the table when we engage as leaders in this specific industry. As women, it's also very important for us to embrace in lifelong learning. We can never stop upskilling ourselves. I upskill myself on a weekly basis and consistently attending some sort of a training to try and learn a new skill. We need to seek also mentorship mentorship, and there are various role models that we can live up to, like for instance some of the women that we've spoke about. But it's very important that we need to take ownership of our own career. I want to go back in time and share my experience on how I've entered the industry. So when I was a student, the late Anita Sony contacted the university, and she wanted student volunteers to work at one of her pre-WSSD events.
Which is PWSSD.
So that was before the World Sustainable Development Conference.
Oh, I see.
That was hosted then at the CSIR-ICC. And now I'm taking back pre-2000s.
Okay.
So as a student, I needed money. So I thought, let me just go and volunteer. I was studying tourism. And at that point, I wasn't very interested in what I was doing. I thought, let me just get a degree. And after that, I will decide what I will do. So when I was working at that event, I was so intrigued by the opportunities and the possibilities so that I just couldn't get enough. And it happened that I managed to build a very good relationship then with Anita and her team. So when they had to organize another event in Mafikeng, I was contacted, and then Vernon, one of her senior event managers, contacted me, and he picked me up from hostel, and together we went and we did the conference in Mafikeng. And so the rest was history. And I think if it wasn't for the fact that I made myself available and look at these opportunities, I might have never been in this industry.
That is so true. That is so true. I mean, we sometimes, I think, take it for granted, those little opportunities that we've had, but you don't realize what big stepping stones they actually are.
But it's also your responsibility to make the most out of that.
Yes.
So if I wasn't intrigued, if I wasn't interested, I might not have had a second opportunity.
Of course.
So we often only get one opportunity, but it is what you make with that one opportunity. If you don't embrace it, it might never work for you. And sometimes you need to take a second and a third opportunity in actually to maximize the opportunities that you get in this industry.
That is true. Because very often people are presented opportunities, but don't see them as opportunities, and see them maybe as a nuisance factor that I either don't have time or the energy or doesn't fit into my schedule. But every single opportunity, no matter how big or small, can be a stepping stone if you use it effectively. That's what you're saying, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now let's move on to the challenges and the barriers, right? We know that there are so many. You and I have been through through it all, and we are still standing. So let's look at those specifically to tourism and MICE industry, right? What do you think are the most persistent challenges holding women back in this industry, and what steps can they take to overcome it?
So I want to focus on 4 challenges that are known in academic literature, but we also experience that in our daily lives. So the first one is there's always gender bias,
Yes,
and leadership barriers. Women have challenges with work-life balance and their family responsibilities.
that's true.
It is known that there is unequal pay in our industry, and there's a lack of financial recognition and resources for women. And then lastly, we also have limited access to funding and entrepreneurship barriers. But I don't want to call them ways in how we can overcome these so-called challenges. We need to manage that.
Yes.
Because these challenges are persistent. So what can we do to manage that? So the National Department of Tourism has put in place what is known as a Women in Tourism body. And that is in each and every province. So as women, we can join these specific bodies and we can start making a meaningful contribution. As women, we must also create our own value chain of businesses, meaning that as women, we will procure from each other, and through that, we can build economies of scale. Earlier on, we spoke about the importance of being a volunteer in our industry, because most of our opportunities stem from that. But often women are not willing to volunteer for the leadership positions in our industry because it takes time and sacrifices.
Yeah. Even though they're probably the perfect ones to do it because they're the most organized. We've seen it.
And it is sometimes a challenge to convince those women to take on those leadership opportunities. But you never know what will actually come out of that and what other opportunities will come for yourself and your business when you take on these opportunities. As women, we often neglect our well-being. And it's very important that amidst everything that we do, that we take care of ourselves mentally and physically. And another opportunity that we are exploring now with a PhD student is with a lack of funding that is available in the industry, that women start to empower themselves through stokvels. So hopefully in future we can come back and we can also share some of the findings from that study.
That would be very interesting.
So if I may share another example.
Before you go to that example though, you talked about the women in tourism groups that the Department of Tourism has set up.
Yes.
So I know our listeners are probably eagerly wanting to know because some people know about it, but not everybody does. How do you get involved in that? How do people in this industry, who do they reach out to?
So there is a dedicated directorate within the Department of Tourism that deals with women in tourism. But they can just go to social media. I have found most of these women in tourism groups on social media. So if you just put in the meta search women in tourism, that will probably just pop up.
Okay.
That's the easiest way. I know Limpopo is specifically very, very active and in what they are doing. Or otherwise, just reach out to you or to me, and we can also share that information with them. But nowadays, with social media, I think all of the information is so readily available.
Yes.
So,
but look for it.
So they can look through that. And also through the associations. The associations should be able to bring you in contact with them.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's look out for that. Now back to that example that you were going to share with us, talking about the challenges and the barriers and how you possibly have overcome.
So one of the other examples that I can share is when I was a lecturer at UJ in 2007, Adrian Woudstra contacted the university. He was then one of the directors at AMA conference, and they wanted again student volunteers to help them at a water and sanitation conference. Mm-hmm. So it was through that engagement, and again by volunteering to say that I will take care of the students, that I was taught about the protocols in our industry. Now again, if I didn't do that specific engagement, I might never have known how government protocols are working. And today, in the role as the chairperson of Tourism Educators South Africa, I can use that background to actually facilitate the conversations that we have with government, because I understand how our government protocol works, what we can do, what you can't do. So you must never underestimate the exposure that you have in the industry and how you can benefit from that later on in your life.
Yeah, that is so true. Sometimes I think people do things or participate in an event or volunteer for something and walk away thinking, that was a waste of my time. But I agree. I don't believe anything is ever wasteful. Somewhere down the line, you realize the relevance, and you will be extremely grateful that you went through that.
But not only that.
Yeah.
It's again, how are you using these events and engagements to work for you? Mm-hmm. So I have one philosophy, is that each and every event I attend, I must make one meaningful connection. I'm an introvert. So for me, it's very difficult to walk into a room and meet everyone and socialize with everyone. That's not my personality.
Right.
But if I engage with one person, and I make one meaningful contribution, I sustain that relationship. And over time, you build a community of and a network that you can engage with. And that's why when I go to Meetings Africa, I know most of the people on the floor. But it was meaningful connections and engagements over time. It's not, again, an instant gratification, and you will instantaneously build the legacy that you want to build.
That is true. And those relationships, don't you feel that there's, again, you tend to call on those people, and initially it's overwhelming. You try to figure out what the connection is, what the relationship is. Yes, you're in the same industry, you have the same passion, but it's forming that support circle, right?
Yes. And through this support circle, we managed to survive COVID.
That is true. That is so true.
And I happened to be part of the SA Events Council by picking up the phone and reaching out to Tess at the time, and just by asking, how is it going in the industry? Are the people surviving? So in our industry, we have also built a network of care. We take care of each other. So as caring and as nurturing as this industry can be, as brutal it can be as well.
That's true.
And we must be very careful not to burn our bridges in this industry. Because in this industry, people don't forget. They will always hold you accountable maybe for one misstep that you have made at some point in your life. So it's a very delicate balance to maintain.
Yes. That is true. And I suppose, there's always two sides to every story.
Yes.
As well. But I think it's nice to see, I think post-COVID, and you probably see this as well, that it's nice to see there is a competitive nature, yes, because we all want the work, but there is more collaboration than ever before.
Yes. And I think during COVID, people were really interested in each other's business, and they were really interested to see how we as a collective can work together to convince government to ease the regulations.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that a lot of relationships were built during the time of COVID. And I think people have a lot more respect for the work that our peers are doing in this industry.
Yeah, I agree. And it's formed, I think, the level of networking and the connections that were formed during that time, people that we didn't know existed, we discovered each other.
Yes.
And those relationships continue. And it's so nice to see each of those people, I think, have a circle. And each of those circles, how they've been benefiting from these relationships, because it's just spun a web, right, so far. And because the collaboration was so great. And we all can lean on each other now, across the country, across the continent even.
And we can celebrate each other's success.
Yeah.
So if one person is hosting a successful event, you know that the whole industry will benefit from that. Because if your competitor can host a successful event, the world see, okay, we can bring our event to South Africa. And they might not make use of your competitor the second time when they visit our country and when they are interested in maybe in a follow-up event.
Yes.
So that diversity also came into play.
That is true. Now, let's move on to your Women in Tourism Executive Development Program that you lead. That is such an interesting program. So tell us more about it. Tell us more about the program, firstly, and how are you assisting women through the program to face their challenges and equipping them to be better versions of themselves, I suppose.
Yeah, you know what, Projeni, again, it was an opportunity.
Yeah.
So the National Department of Tourism had a tender for an institution of higher learning to offer the program. And I said, let's put a tender on the table. I didn't know actually how to draft a tender, but we did it. And with any tender, there's a checklist.
Yep.
And I just ensure that we've met all the criteria in the checklist. So we ended up winning the tender.
Brilliant.
And it was initially a pilot. So we had the first intake and it went very well.
And when was this?
This was already end of 2016, beginning of 2017.
Okay, quite a while ago
So
already.
we are nearly now about 8-9 years into this program. So the first intake went very well. And I've learned there also to cope, again, with the protocol experience that I've had, to understand how do you make the life easier of the government official who is overseeing this program. And for me, it was very important to maintain a relationship with them and to understand what are their needs.
Yeah.
And I went above and beyond of what was expected. So, for instance, we created WhatsApp groups in which I, until today, communicate with the women. So for every intake, there's a separate WhatsApp group. They've now asked me to merge everything because they've now realized that there's also a community amongst themselves. So over the years, we had about an 85% graduation rate. Wonderful. So we have 104 graduates. And about 2/3 of the women that have gone through the program had career advancement. So for us, we actively, until today, continue to trace the women. So for me, when I started with this program, it wasn't students come in, they exit the program, and they need to move on. So for me, it's important to ensure that the well-being of the women that have gone through this program are still being taken care of. And what they've started to do, whenever there's an opportunity available, say for instance in their specific organization, they will share that with the rest of the group. So although there's women that have gone through difficult times and not being able to work, through this network that we've created, they are also now supporting each other and create opportunities for others. So I was at Meetings Africa last week, and then one of the ladies approached me and said, you know what, through what was shared in our network, I've applied and I have now advanced my career. I'm now in a senior management position, and she's absolutely glowing.
Oh, amazing.
And it's again important that if you take on a program like that, it is for me a lifetime commitment. You must have the heart for that. It is, the academic journey is one part of that, but the mentorship and the coaching that goes with that has also been enriching for me. So we sometimes think in education, I'm the only one that is giving.
Yes.
But most of the time, you get so much more by actively engaging with the graduates.
That is so true. It's a mutual learning environment, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and people don't realize that, I think. But I mean, I was a teacher in my past life, and I think every course or class that you sit with is a totally different learning experience, and because you're dealing with people who come from different backgrounds, right? And each one has their story, and how they graduate through the program is so fascinating. And then again, what I appreciate you saying is that follow through that some of us don't get to see as a teacher, how those students evolve and where they end up is such a beautiful story again.
And again, we must remember that for many of these women, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And many of them have decided to make most of that. Now, it's also important that it is not just a walk in the park.
Yeah.
There are challenges.
Yeah.
And during the time when we were busy with the program, we consistently do monitoring and evaluation by actively engaging with the women, but also through questionnaires.
Okay.
Because the National Department of Tourism wanted to know what challenges will persist.
Yes.
And what can possibly be a stumbling block for the women to be successful in the program. So we've clustered that into two areas. First of all, it is the challenges that women experience at home and the challenges women experience in the workplace. And sometimes there's an overlap, but sometimes it is also distinct in that specific area. So if we look at the challenges that women experience in the workplace, it is work-life balance, and we spoke about that early on. Many of these women are single mothers. Many of these women don't have the support of a spouse or a family member to try and juggle all of these different responsibilities. Many of these women had mental health issues. And they were bold enough and brave enough to say, I need help. And luckily through our institution, we have counseling services and you can then direct them to that. It's very private and people will never know who these women are that had to get help, but this happens. And I think at some point in our lives, we all might need a little bit of counseling and we all might need a little bit of emotional support, but it's about acknowledging that you need that. And then, of course, women also are faced with a lot of financial challenges and resources because it is expensive to study and to run a household and to get to work. And although this was supported by the National Department of Tourism, you still have expensive driving to study schools and so forth. The challenges in the workplace more relates to human resource policies where they did not understand our tuition model. For instance, the women did not get leave to work on their portfolios, which was their final formative assessment. So the fact that they didn't have to write an exam didn't allow them to get the leave or the study leave needed in order to complete the portfolios. So there's a lot of engagement that had to take place. In some instances, also women had challenges with management support because an executive manager might have supported you to do the program, but your senior manager might see you as a threat and also make it impossible for you sometimes to get to your schoolwork. And then, of course, in our industry, women, or in most positions, we need to work long hours.
That's true.
So it's again balancing the long working hours with the schoolwork, with the family life that had some challenges.
And I'm so glad, you brought up all these challenges. They're all real. They're so relevant. And as much as we can talk today about women learning to find their confidence, learning to find their voice, learning to step up, but at the same time, I think our message today is to those companies that employ women who need to acknowledge the spaces they're coming from within. Because very often we expect you to do your job and are completely unaware or refuse to even take into consciousness what is going on in her life, and I think it's probably across the board with all employees because it affects their work performance, right? It affects so many things. And as much as there's a job to be done, but it is a person who has a life, and particularly a woman carrying so many, wearing so many hats, I suppose, that is the challenge. And understanding that, I think it is definitely something all employers actually need to be cognizant of, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why for many women to work from home is a conscious decision when they are selecting a career. And I think that's also one of the reasons why the events industry is such a popular industry as a career for women, because there is some sort of a flexibility in that. But unfortunately, you have to reach the middle or the top management position in order to have that kind of flexibility. So, there's, I think, still a lot to be learned and a lot to understand, because at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line for a business and they want to make profit. And in order to make the profit, they need the people on the floor.
That is true. But I think a key takeaway from here, again, like we're saying, is one, for employees to be aware of circumstances so that you can have a more productive employee. And also, I think, as for women, I mean, a program like this, goes back to your probably mantra of education is key, no matter how old you are, no matter what stage of life you are in, no matter what form it comes in, right?
And for me, education is the foundation that you need to build on. And I've made reference earlier on to a career in lifelong learning.
Yes.
So maybe if I can again use myself,
yes, please.
When I did my CMP. So when Helen Brewer brought this to South Africa, there was two ways in how we could accumulate enough points in order to be eligible to write the designation exam. The first stream was through your work experience and quite an extensive portfolio of evidence of your contribution to the industry, your experience in the industry. And the other stream was through your formal academic qualifications.
Okay.
And at that time, I had a master's degree. And through that qualification, I nearly automatically qualified for the exam.
I see.
So your formal qualifications still fast track your
Yes.
career
Okay.
in this industry. And there's some research that's been done in terms of the pay gaps also between people with formal education as opposed to people that do not have the same qualifications. But we need to understand that formal education provides the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to build on that foundation through specialization and professionalization. And how do you do that? You do that through your professional designations.
Okay.
So for me, there's a synergy between the two. And I think that that's why I have been holding on to my Certified Meetings Professional designation, because I can see the value out of that. And to retain my CMP, I have to invest in continuous professional development. And how do you get continuous professional development? You get that through your attendance of industry engagements.
Mm-hmm.
And there's most of the time an educational component that is linked to that.
That is true.
It is by upskilling yourself through non-formal programs. So that is available on the internet, like for instance through LinkedIn or Coursera, where you can maybe do a massive open online course. Or you can just do that by on-the-job training. So we mustn't cluster further education and training just in terms of the formal side of that. But we need to acknowledge that to get a depth and a specialization, you need to look at all these other platforms where learning can also take place.
How do you view the future for women in the MICE and tourism industry?
First of all, Projeni, I think it's important that we embrace the change.
Mm-hmm.
We need to embrace the technology that is available today, artificial intelligence and everything that comes with that. Now, if we think back many years ago when calculators was introduced in schools, our parents were up in arms because they said our kids won't be able to add and divide and subtract and multiply.
Yeah.
But what calculators have done at that time is helped us to do more advanced mathematical calculations.
That is true.
And the same is applicable today in a world of artificial intelligence and technology.
That is so true.
But we have a responsibility.
Yeah.
We need to use it ethically, and we need to upskill ourselves to know how to use it in the most effective way. Because by using platforms like, for instance, Cvent, we can plan an event more accurately, we can manage our time better, and we can work smarter.
That's true.
So technology, in my opinion, is not here to replace us. And there are articles available that shows that technology will not make our jobs absolute. And one of the careers that will not be made absolute is being an events manager, because we are a people-orientated and people-driven industry.
Yes, of course.
People are engaging in events because they have a hunger to connect with people. They have a hunger to have a face-to-face engagement with each other.
Yeah.
And although we can host hybrid events, and I am a bit advocate for hybrid events, because specifically in our space with limited resources, it still gives you an opportunity to connect with like-minded peers. We still want to connect. And why not use technology if it can make our life easier? I think in South Africa today, we need women to become more prominent in our industry. In my opinion, although there's a lot of women working in the events industry, many of these women are still in the lower to middle management positions.
Hiding on the sidelines.
Yes. And I would like to see a lot more women entrepreneurs entering this industry, like our progenies, who come forward with new and innovative event concepts and take it to the rural communities where it is needed. Because many of these events are centralized where the infrastructure is.
Yes.
But if we take events to the rural communities, we are creating the infrastructure needed to uplift communities, to give job opportunities, and to advance people's lives. So I think as women, we have all the tools and we have all the opportunities to bring about this change that we want to see.
Yeah. Like they say, right? If there's no seat at the table, build your own.
But unfortunately, sometimes women are not even allowed into the room.
That is true. That is so true. Still today, I was reading the stats about that internationally. Yes. It is scary to see the stats on what a small percentage of women actually that sit on boards all over the world. It is still so limited.
So with your Forbes 100, it's less than 20%. So MPI have also done a study in 2022, and they've indicated only about 28% of women have the possibilities to advance to a senior to executive level in the events and hospitality space. Okay. And I mean, ITB Berlin is currently taking place. If you look at the photos, who has cut the ribbon?
A lineup of men.
Yeah.
I've seen a few of those recently.
And you see the women standing behind them, clapping, because the men are still holding on those positions. But I must say, most of the opportunities that I had in this industry comes from men.
Really?
Who gave me a seat at the table. Who allowed me to learn with them and from them. So we mustn't have this mindset that men are excluding us from this industry. I think we must also start to celebrate and acknowledge some of the wonderful work that a lot of men are doing for women in our industry.
Yeah.
And one of them is Kwachidonkur. I mean, it's not only in South Africa, but it's across the continent, where through all of his various initiatives, he ensures that the gender balance is always in your events program, where it is ensured that women are part of the organizing committee, where women can participate, and where women are celebrated. And I think that we need more people like that gives this platform for women, not only in South Africa, but across the African continent.
Yeah. And you're so right. I think there are many men out there that have, opened their arms, given us a seat at the table, are willing to support. And they're there within many organizations as well. But for me, I somehow feel that it is sometimes self-destructive. We exclude ourselves because of our inner thoughts telling us that we're not worthy, we're not enough, we can't. And sometimes we need to dispel those thoughts and surround yourself, right, with people that are opening the door for you to give you a step in. So what are your thoughts on that? And what is your piece of advice for women in the industry today that they could walk away from with this discussion that we've had?
I think first of all, as women, we need to start to advocate for each other.
Yeah.
Because if we're not advocating for each other, not creating opportunities for each other, I don't think that we will be able to make the circle bigger. We must be very mindful of the so-called pull her down syndrome, which is also quite evident in the industry. I had often students phoning me in tears and say that one of their female managers has made the life impossible for them. So unfortunately, this also exists, and I think we need to acknowledge that it exists. And how can we as women ensure that we embrace each other? Because there's for everyone a seat at the table. It's just about ensuring that you allow somebody the opportunity to grab a chair and to come and sit next to you. So if I may conclude, I think it's important for women to get out of our comfort zone. We must never stop learning. And you must know that you are a worthy woman who is a valuable asset and that can contribute to the successes we are yet to achieve in this business events industry.
Nellie, thank you so much for all that you have shared with us today. I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. I think it could go on for much longer, but we really, really appreciate having you with us today. So thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you so much for the opportunity. And it was an honor and a privilege to be here today. Thank you, Projeni.
Only a pleasure. What an inspiring and insightful conversation with Prof. Nellie Swart. If there's one thing I hope you take away from today's episode, it's this. It's your career, your leadership, and your impact, and it's in your hands. Yes, there are challenges, but there are also opportunities waiting to be claimed. And it's up to us to step up, support each other, and push for the change we want to see in MICE and tourism. I know firsthand what it's like to navigate this industry as a woman. I face the barriers, the biases, the moments of doubt, but I've also experienced the power of resilience, the strength of a supportive network, and the importance of owning your place in the room. And that's what I want for every woman listening today, to step up with confidence, to claim your space, and to never underestimate the value you bring. So here's my challenge to you. What's one action you're going to take from today's conversation? Are you going to mentor someone? Speak up in a meeting? Enroll in a leadership course? Well, whatever it is, take that step, because your journey starts with action. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Africa Event Connect on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And share this with a colleague who needs to hear this message. Join the conversation, tag me on LinkedIn or Instagram, and let's keep this discussion going. Thank you for tuning in, for being part of this movement, and for making a difference in our industry. For me, your host, Projeni Pather, keep pushing boundaries, keep lifting others, and keep making an impact.